Well, here we are back in the dyno room with the Weaky 383 with the engine that cannot make any power. I've done a lot of work and I've got a lot to tell you. Settle in and here we go.
Nick's Garage is supported by Atlas Equipment and K-Tool International. Welcome back to Nick's Garage, a little shop near Montreal where all kinds of American muscle cars come for a little of Nick's unique brand of passion for cars and their engines. Sometimes the work is easy and things just seem to fall into place. But more often than not, these machines bring frustrating issues and puzzling problems with them when they come to the shop. Today we update you on one of the more difficult jobs, an original engine rebuild that we've come to lovingly refer to as Old Weaky, the low power 383.
Hi, I'm Nick and welcome to my shop. Yeah, we're back in the dyno room with Weaky 383. Joe brought this car, 1970 Roadrunner from New York, brought it to me to look for more power in his 383. He told me someone rebuilt the engine in the past, and for some reason when he got the engine back and put it back in the car, he didn't have the power he used to have. So he sent the car to me. So when the car was brought to me here, I removed the cylinder heads of the engine in the car to see what was going on. So this is what I found out. He had a thick head gasket, and I noticed that the valves were sunken in on the cylinder heads. So I wanted to do something very simple. I said, you know, I'm going to do a simple valve job, and I noticed the valves were sunk, but you know what? We have a budget to follow. So I did a simple valve job without cutting the seats. All I did was regrind the valves. And then during that period of time, Joe tells me, Nick, I prefer a bullet cap. And he also wanted me to put the engine on the dyno. Okay, so for that reason, we took the engine out of the car, got him a bullet cam, and of course I wanted to also bring up the compression ratio. I realized doing a compression test before I removed the engine from the car at a 150, 155 cylinder pressure. So then that's when I removed the heads in the car, and I noticed that the heads were not milled down and he had a thick gasket. So just to keep you guys up to date, I put a thinner gasket of 20 thou, removed the 43 that he had before, and I also milled the heads 20 thou to bring up the compression ratio, which eventually we did to 175. So after doing all this work, we put the engine on the dynamometer with this bullet cam, with the head shaved down, with more compression, and then we start doing some testing. Ready? I don't know, we haven't made factory horsepower. Check it out. We only reached 330 at 4,900. Factory is 335.
That's terrible.
And you know, from the factory, a 383 1970 should have 425 foot-pounds of torque and 335 horsepower. We couldn't get more than 380, or should I say 380, 385 foot-pounds of torque. Now this is factory. Why am I not getting 425 foot-pounds of torque? Horsepower was there, 330, 335, 338, whatever. But I couldn't get the torque numbers up. And you know what? I wasn't happy with that. And of course, I didn't want to tell Joe anything because the factory torque is 425 and I'm showing 380. I had some previous 383s in the past that I had on the dyno. They were 400, 410, 420 foot-pounds of torque. And of course, we went with the exhaust manifolds on Joe's engine with the cast iron intake manifold. We also tested 4 carburetors and we ended up all with the same average 330, 335 horsepower, and again, an average of 380 foot-pounds of torque. Where's all that torque gone? That's the question. So doing test after test after test, playing with the timing, playing with different carburetors, nothing changed. And then, not on camera, I decided to stay one night and put on an aluminum intake manifold. It's a dual plane. It was not a high rise. It was a LD4BBL, which is the aluminum intake 4-barrel from Elderbrock. I did some testing with it too. Yeah, the torque numbers are again 380, and the horsepower maybe went up by 10 numbers. No big deal, but the torque numbers were still there. So forget the aluminum intake. That's not the issue. Carburetors were not the issue. So on our last video, or should I say previous video, we decided to go back with a cam that Joe had in the engine in the first place. So the comp cam that he had when the car first arrived there, we put it back into the engine. And nothing else, just the cam itself. We checked the degrees where it was exactly where it's supposed to be. We put it back in there and we did further testing. Here we go. If it goes good, I'm going down.
Okay.
I didn't see much. Same torque numbers. Same torque numbers, 382. The torque numbers were the same, roughly 380, but we lost about 18 horsepower. So that was the comp cam we had in there. And of course, I'm still not happy. Testing and testing, playing with the timing, playing with different carburetors. Couldn't get more than 380 foot-pounds of torque. So where was the problem? So after doing all this work, I remember when I installed the heads back on that the valves were a bit sunk in. I have done cylinder heads with the 440 that the valves were sunk in, and I installed them on the engine, but at least I had factory horsepower and torque numbers. But on a 383, on the heads that belong to the engine are right here. These are the 906 castings. If you guys take a good look, if you look at the valves, they're below the chamber. It's what you call sunken valve. And when the valves are sunken or sunk in, you lose horsepower. In other words, you lose flow. So you lose flow, you lose the volume of air going in the cylinder, you lose power. Why were they sunk? Because I had a few valve jobs done. So every time you do a valve job, you have to keep grinding the seat. So when you grind it, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know how many valve jobs this had. It had so many valve jobs that the valve, as you're cutting metal, the valve sinks in. The only job I did when I re-cleaned these heads, when I cleaned them, all I did was regrind the valves. I did not touch the seats. I lapped them in because I didn't want to cut the seats because then I would have sunk them even more. So I'm working on a budget with my client, so I'm trying to save him money. At the same time, keep it within budget and make the power we're looking for. So, you know, you can fix it by buying another set of 906 heads. We have a few sets, but most of them are sunken valves. But also, I have a set of castings here, 346 castings. They're 1973. I believe they're hardened seats, and they never had a valve job. We did the valve job for the first time in-house with Manny, and also installed brand new milling valves. If you guys take a good look versus the head that came off the car, and if you look at it right here, you can see that the valve is below the chamber. Now, if you go to the cylinder head that had a valve job for only once in its lifetime with brand new valves, when they're brand new, the valves, the valve is very thick and it's above the chamber. It will give us more compression and also more flow. So I have a set of heads ready. I also had them milled down to get more compression, and also I reinstalled the bullet cap. Why? It made 20 more horsepower. So here we are now. I'm ready to install another set of cylinder heads, again with the thin shim gasket the way it came from the factory, and of course the bullet cap is in there, and a fresh set of cylinder heads. You know, today we use unleaded gas In those days, the 906 castings were soft seats. They were not hardened seats like they have in today's engines. On this casting, the 346, I believe they're hardened seats. So in other words, you could use unleaded gas with no issues whatsoever. That is the reason why I went with the 346. And of course, these cylinder heads, I don't have no use for them. I will give them back to Joe because they are matching heads to the block, matching block to the car. I will give them back to him in a box in the trunk. But in the meantime, our goal is let's make some power on this engine. Well, I call it the Weaky 383 because I've never seen anything so weak. You know, I had another engine with a 383, leaky, oily seal. I had an issue with that, fighting it, and that was an issue with that 383. And here I am again with another 383, an issue of no torque. Why? Here I am playing with cams, carburetors, intake. I can't get that past 380 foot-pounds of torque. Now I've got the cylinder heads I want. I got the bullet cam back in here. And now we have another issue. You know, I've planed these heads down because I wanted to bring up the cylinder pressure now to 180, not 175. So I planed down these heads to 35 thou. 35, not 20, 35. Because I want to bring the 175 cylinder pressure to 180. Not only that, don't forget, now that the valve is much thicker, of course, the valve is much closer to the piston. And if you guys take a good look, there are no valve reliefs in these pistons. None whatsoever. So what do you think my issue is? Yeah, you guessed right. The valve is too close to the piston. So there's another dilemma. To check piston to valve clearance, I had the cylinder head installed with the head gasket, torque down, and if you notice here, I have two light springs. Okay? So what you have is you have the engine assembled with two push rods, your rocker shaft with the rocker arms, and then as you turn the engine over and as the valve starts to open, you just keep pushing this until you see what clearance you got. Then at one moment, as you see here, you see it's free. Then as the piston comes up and as the valve opens, you notice that this, you feel, you know, you have the touch ready, you feel it, it hits. So then you put a dial indicator, and at the closest point, you put a dial indicator on it, and then you see what clearance you got. So as you turn the crank back and forth, you're playing with the valve. It's on the cylinder head right here, cylinder number one. You're pushing up and down the valve, and you notice where the shortest distance is. As it travels the shortest travel, you put your dial indicator on it, and you put it, and you see we got something like 12 to 15 thou. I'm looking for 100 on the exhaust valve. I got 90 on the intake, so I'm going to live with that. But on the exhaust, I only got 13 to 15 or thou. I need 100. I don't have it. So for that reason, we're not going to go along with the installation and dyno testing. So we're going to have to do something with these pistons. So, you know, some people are telling me, Nick, go put a big thick gasket, give you more clearance. But reality, it won't give me enough clearance. But then again, I'm dropping the compression, the cylinder pressure. I don't want to do that. So the only thing left to do is two things, you guys. First, let me tell you, we need a valve relief on the exhaust. The intake, I make it just enough. But the exhaust valve, I need 100 thou piston to valve clearance. All I have is about 10 to 15 thou. That's nowhere near safety. That's gonna have a major catastrophe when I rev this engine. So this is what I came up with. You let me know what you guys think. I had a valve cut like a knife. So what do you do in this case? We leave the pistons in the block, put this on another cylinder head that has no valves, and put this on all one by one on each exhaust valve or port, I should say. And then put the cylinder head on, put this in like this, like so. Look, you see that? I'm using the cylinder head as a guide. You got to remove the cylinder head 3-4 times to do the job. Then you attach the valve to a drill. You put the head on, you got the valve, you bring the piston to the closest point to the valve at that angle with the cam timing, then you start drilling. And you got to drill for a depth of about maybe 70 to 80 thou to get the clearance I want. So, if some viewers that don't know what a valve relief is, this is what it is. Here's a piston from the factory, has a valve relief. All I need is one, or it's called an eyelid, whatever you want to call it. So when the piston is up in the deck, this is turning on the cylinder head as a guide, and I go up and down with the drill motor, and I just keep cutting like this. What I'm actually doing is making clearance. So when that piston comes up and that valve is opening, this is what the action you have in the cylinder. Okay? And you want to make sure that you got the clearance in the piston. Most important is that we hope that these pistons are thick enough. And for that reason, I'm going to have to take them out of the block and make a measurement if I don't find the pistons I want. So there you have it. And of course, the valve has to be, this cutting valve has to be slightly bigger than the valve, because not only do you have the depth, you also need the side clearance. So the diameter has to be at least 40 thou around bigger. Or like many people say, Nick, just change the pistons. Sure, I'm working on that right now. Now I could say one thing, we're gonna blow the budget. Sure, changing pistons, you gotta take everything apart. You gotta rebalance the crank. But I cannot find the pistons I want. I want pistons of a very high compression distant height. I want it to be a 30 overbore. I want a 1/16 top and second ring thickness. And I want them to be forged flat top with valve reliefs. I'm going to start looking for that. I haven't found a set yet. So there is a few choices we can do. Are we going to blow the budget? Yes, we are. Either way, whatever. And you know, I put a lot of time not on the clock on this issue, not on the clock. Now this is being on the dyno the second time. And of course, I haven't done any testing yet because I noticed that the valve and piston is too close. Do I go to a smaller cam? No. Do I go to a thicker gasket? No. I want to make it fit because I want to make the compression the power I want. So now I got to look for pistons. If I don't find any, maybe we'll drill it. And of course, if we drill it, we're going to make a mess. So what do? Remove 8 pistons and have them at the machine shop, remove the connector rods, put them back on. Hopefully no pistons break. And then we make the valve reliefs. And of course, if I don't have to balance the crank, it's a good thing because I don't want to touch the rear seal. Because if you notice on the first video that the rear seal leaked right at the beginning while we're warming up or breaking in the cam. But after that, it stopped leaking. And I remember Joel telling me that the rear seal did not leak. I believed him because I drove the car. I didn't see no rear seal leaking. But I never touched the crank. All I did was the valves and the cylinder heads and a cam change. Putting it on the dyno, breaking in the cam. Yeah, there was a major oil leak. And all of a sudden, for some magic trick, it stopped on its own. How? I don't know. I didn't go there yet. I didn't touch it yet. And I remember Joel telling me, if you have to remove the crankshaft for any reason, Nick, always put back the same rear seal because it did not leak. So I'm not there yet. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to look at my choices to see where I'm going to go. What would you guys do? You know, another dilemma is when you remove the piston out of the cylinder block, and I need to give the piston to the machine shop if we stay with the same pistons to make the valve reliefs at the machine shop. These piston pins are press fit on the connector rod. There is a slight chance that when you press the pin out of the connector rod, there's a good chance that you might crack the piston. So once you crack the piston, forget it, we're going to go with a set of new pistons. That is the other reason. And another thing I want to tell you from the factory, you know, I read some comments, some people were telling me, Nick, that 383s were not always perfect. Let me show you something. From what I see, this block was never decked. If you guys take a good look here, I've measured every piston, what it is below the deck. And this block was never decked, from what I can tell. Now, if you come over to this side, you get a 10th thou difference. 008, 005, 003, 005. So what does that tell you? That side is going to have less compression if we don't deck the block. But then again, taking the block, we got to take apart the whole thing, deck the block, but why bother, you know? And the way the budget is going, forget it, we're going to blow it anyways. So I thought of something else. When I put that cylinder head on, I'm going to mill it 5 thou more to balance out the compression. You know, you could save money, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to mark the head left. I'm going to mark the cylinder head right, so you can't go wrong with that. But after all, The results is what's going to tell us what happens. So, do we get another set of pistons if I can find the ones I want? Or do we cut those? What would you guys do?
So Nick is standing face to face with a dilemma of how to proceed with Old Weaky. Does he try and find new pistons that won't hit the valves and blow his client's budget sky high, while also risking an oil leak at the rear main seal? Or does he modify the existing pistons by cutting them? And then does he cut them in place and spray filings around the engine? Or does he take them to the machine shop and risk cracking them with the press-fit pins? Whatever he decides to do, Nick knows he can't leave things as they are.
If you don't have enough piston and valve clearance, we could have a big catastrophe. In other words, you know, you're gonna smash the piston, you're gonna bend the valve, but you know, even though it's not gonna hit once, it's gonna hit multiple times because that engine RPM, especially at a high RPM, because at a high RPM, the valve and piston get closer. So a high RPM, when they hit, or should I say when they make a contact, and that valve bends and hits, and then it breaks off, it drops into the cylinder, puts a hole through the piston, smashes, squeezes it right up into the chamber, puts a hole in the side of the cylinder, there goes the block. Can it be replaced with a sleeve? Who knows? Cylinder head will be scrapped. Who cares? We'll get another cylinder head. But it's a catastrophe. But the thing is, you don't want that to happen. The reason why? Because once you built this engine, you want to make sure it's good because it's not a local client that's in town. It's going to go at a distance from out of town. So you want to make sure the customer doesn't call you and tell you, Nick, I dropped the valve and blew the engine. And you know, you don't want to hear that because this is a matching engine to the car. I know it's got good forged crank, forged rods, but just sometimes you never know. So you got to use your best insurance policy, your best knowledge that you put it together. You got all the clearances you want. And you know, you miss a gear when you're driving a 4-speed car and you over rev it, you know you're going to have a contact. And when that valve drops and smashes everything, it's a catastrophe. So you want that extra insurance. You make sure you have that clearance between the valve and the piston, that you have no contact. And there you have it. You know, a lot of times you have engines that come in here that have been touched by many people in the past, and a lot of things are wrong. Yeah, I've seen a lot of things are being cut, like sunken valves. You know, I don't have an open wallet in this, so I try to use the same heads. You know, like I said earlier, I've used cylinder heads, sunken valves that made the power, but they were on 440 engines, not on the 383. And for some reason, it's not working on this one. That is the reason why I went with another set of cylinder heads. And you know, from the factory, if you guys take a look, that this deck is much higher than this side. And from what I see, from my knowledge, this deck was never cut before on either side. The crank is a forged crank. I'm sure not the 4 rods are shorter on one side and longer on the other side. Who knows? And am I going to take it apart? I'm going to find out soon. What do you guys think? What would you do? What would you tell your client? And let me tell you another thing. Am I putting this all on the clock? I don't think so. You know, my goal is to make my customer happy, keep it within budget. I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to use all my sources to do the best I can. And here we are, and we're going to put it back in the dyno when it's all done, and we'll see how it goes. You know, it is a challenge. You know, I have a lot of my friends and viewers that are saying, Nick, it's the cam, it's the intake, it's the carburetor, it's not the tuning. It's not the carburetor, it's not the tuning. I think it's the flow in the cylinder heads. You know, like I said earlier before, I had some 383 engines that had made 400 plus foot-pounds of torque. This one here is a stubborn one, stays at 380. Horsepower, 330, 335, okay, but the torque numbers are what I want. That is when you accelerate the car from one corner to another. It's all in the torque. And if I can't get over 420, I'm not happy. So I'm gonna challenge this and battle it as much as I can. And I will keep you guys up to date. The story is not over yet. We're gonna make another video once the heads are installed. And of course, with new pistons or with the valve reliefs or whatever. And then one way or another, we're gonna put this rotor back on the road and make a drive, or should I say, take it a drive and see what it can do. You know, I had a lot of engines. A lot of them were simple, but this Weaky 383 is a challenge. I don't know why it's giving me a tough time for some reason. And you know, a lot of people were telling me this and that, but we're gonna give it our best shot. And you know, like I said, everything's a challenge. It is a dream garage. It's fun. Let's find the power. Let's make our customer happy, and that's all that counts. And thanks for watching us here in Nick's Garage.
Here's a very different kind of update from the shop. Regular viewers will remember Leo and his purple Charger. He built a 360 for the car and it blew a gasket on Nick's dyno a couple of years ago. We wanted to let you know that Leo fixed his engine pronto and has been enjoying it ever since. And what better way to show you than with a little footage of him having fun on a sunny afternoon.
All right, here we go.
Attaboy, Leo. That's how we do things at Nick's Garage.
And you guys, if you look down below the video, we have a whole bunch of merchandise that you guys can buy. So whatever you like, buy it, love it, wear it, and enjoy it. And help spread the word of Nick's Garage. And if you have some time, check out our Patreon page. We have extra content and you guys can watch it and take it from there. And we'll see you next time.